We are live. Hello, Felicia.
Hello, hello, hello.
All
So
right.
exciting.
I am very excited and I want to give you a proper introduction here. So, I want to welcome everyone to Intentioning This. Intentioning This LinkedIn Live series, which is also streaming on all the other platforms so that we can reach as many people as possible with the fabulous information and inspiration that I know Felicia is going to share with us today. I'm Gloria Felt. I'm co founder and president of Take the Lead. And today I have the great pleasure of introducing you to someone who has also been on the same mission to achieve gender parity in leadership that I have been on for these many years. And I admire the way she does it, as well as admiring her as an incredible partner in so many different ways. Felicia Davis is the founder of the Black Women's Collective. She is also the founder of the Women's Branding Institute, and she empowers women. I love this description of herself. She empowers women at the intersection of sovereignty, self-expression, and social justice. She's also a Take the Lead leadership ambassador who has served as the lead trainer for several of our very powerful 50 Women Can Change the World in, you name the sector. In this case, we worked on nonprofit leaders together. And she's also a mom and a self-described glamour, right? Did I say that right? Glamour. She's
That's
the
right.
glamour. I love following the pictures of you with your granddaughter and how you you glamorize her too. She's a
Yes,
cutie pie.
yes.
Uh, Felicia also received the Martin Luther King Living the Dream Award in Phoenix for her community service. And Felicia went from entry level in the corporate world to HR vice president to now having her own diversified business. So that's where I'd like to start, Felicia. Would you share that path? It's a very interesting one. Would you share that with everyone?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Gloria. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. It's so timely, and just want to thank you for allowing me to share with your platform. And so, yeah, a little bit about my background and how I came to be the Felicia that you see today from a professional perspective. As Gloria mentioned, I started out at, how they say that you started from the bottom, now you're here. I literally started out from the bottom as an HR assistant. And actually, before I got into HR, I was actually an admin assistant in the customer service department. And I used to love seeing those women in HR. I just got so excited anytime they would do like new hire orientations and come do presentations to the employees. And I said, I would love to do that. And so one day I bravely approached the VP of HR and I told him that I really wanted to work for him. And he said, wow, no one has ever approached me in that way. I
Wow.
don't have anything available now, but listen, I'm going to give you 30 minutes on my calendar. And we set that meeting up, and that 30 minutes turned into a 2-hour appointment. And the rest, as they say, is history. I started out as an HR assistant and made my way through the ranks. And I left my corporate gig 10 years ago as an HR executive. And, it's just one of those things that I know how important this work is, and I just cannot not do this work. And so I'm excited to be here to share a little bit more about that.
So before we move into some of the questions that I want to ask you about racial healing, which is one of the many expertises that you bring, and that's what I want to focus on most today. I want to make a point of two things that you said when you described your trajectory. And one is one of the things that I think is so important that we often don't get taught early on, which is it doesn't matter where you start, just start.
Yeah.
Just start.
Yeah.
And the second thing is ask. Ask what
Yes.
you want.
Oh my goodness. Just, in back in those days, like there was no sense of like fear. It's like, hey, I saw something that I wanted. I saw something that excited me. And I just worked up the courage to actually to approach the decision maker. Like I didn't go through all the other channels. I went directly to the decision maker. And I have no doubts that that is the reason that allowed me to get my foot in the realms of HR. I have no doubt at all.
That is just, I think that's great. And it's a wonderful example for all women as we are looking at what we want to do now or next. And those two principles are just incredible. So you set a wonderful example. Now, I want to go into the area of expertise that you've developed over the years. And I know you've particularly been working in the last 2 years on racial healing. So, would you describe for us exactly what it is and why do we need it today, especially?
Oh my goodness. Um, I think that, when in terms of racial healing, the reason why we need it is because it's just become so much more in our face in terms of just the things that people are being put up against, right? It's so much more in our face. And so that's why it's so important now. And specifically, the work that I do is more one-on-one with women directly, because this work is so sensitive. It's something that, you cannot, when you talk about being trauma informed, right? You have to take a very trauma informed approach. I'm not a therapist or anything like that, so I don't step over the reins of my territory, but I do work from a trauma informed perspective, from the perspective, number one, I've personally had some trauma from that perspective, but also knowing what it feels like when you feel like you've been through an experience and you cannot use your voice in the way that you want to use it for fear of being reprimanded, for fear of being left behind, for fear of not being able to get the visibility opportunities that you need, for fear of not being able to really develop those powerful relationships that are necessary no matter where you are in this world. Relationships are they're the highest form of currency that you need to get ahead anywhere,
Oh,
right?
yes. Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm working with women, we really, really we work very personally around like some of the things that they went through. And I help them kind of really, number one, to own it instead of trying to hide it and not deal with it, to own it and really talk about what happened to them. And then we go through some very specific exercises that help them kind of get into the, the word soma is all about the body, right? So really get into to some somatic exercises that help them really embody being able to feel powerful enough to use their voice when they feel that they've been violated in any way, or not only when they personally been violated, but also when it comes to allyship, right? How
Mm-hmm.
do you step up and be a voice, kind of stand in the gap for those who aren't ready, who haven't built up the courage to really speak up for themselves, to be a true ally in this work? And so that's some of the work that we do. And then also from a corporate perspective, I have some speak up and influence programs that we do with corporate, from a corporate perspective, from a workshop programming perspective, but really starting out is more personal, one-to-one intimate work that I do with women.
Mm-hmm. So, is there a specific definition of racial healing, or you've given a really great description of the work that you do? If I were to say what exactly is racial healing, is there a specific definition of it, or is it that broad
Yeah,
um, thing?
it's more broad because it can happen. And one thing I want to say is that racial healing, although it's definitely more focused on people who are marginalized, but all of us have to deal with this because no matter who you are, no matter what your skin color is, right? You have to be able to go through this process, because sometimes it's like I'm not the direct perpetrator of it, right? But because of culturally how I've been brought up, right? It's been ingrained into me how to respond to certain situations, right? And so it does become a more broad-based situation where you're dealing with things on a very, very particular what's happened for you specifically.
Okay. This is, I hadn't thought about this before, but it just strikes me that this is very in line with the leadership intentioning tool in my book Intentioning, which is uncover yourself. So you have to
Mm.
dig into yourself. You have to uncover what's in there and deal with it, basically
You
grapple with
have
it,
to.
deal with it, yeah, before you can become the leader that you are able to be. I don't
Absolutely.
know if I'm
Absolutely. Because unless you're willing to, if you're not willing to go within, right?
hmm
Then none of it will matter. Like I can give you all the practices, I can give you all the exercises, I can give you all of these things, but unless you're willing to truly go within, right? To right, like you said, right? Then none of this stuff will work. So you have to be willing to do that work that's the most painful, to be honest with you, right? When
yeah.
you're looking within, that's the most painful work. And so
hmm
you got to be able to do that in order to have your breakthrough.
So I know you talk about the four eyes of oppression, the four eyes, not eyes, but letter I, right?
But yep, the letter I's, yeah. Yeah,
Would
and
you, what are
this
those?
is so the four eyes of oppression. When you think about oppression, it really shows up in four different ways. There's the ideological oppression, right? And this is all about beliefs, specifically as it relates to prejudices, right? So when you think ideologically, ideological oppression is about your belief system, it's about prejudice, it's about like what you've been taught growing up as a child, right? The things that inform how you show up today as a leader, right? And then there is institutional oppression, and you know this very well, Gloria. This is all about policies, specifically those are that are discriminatory, and about the culture inside the organization. Then you have the interpersonal oppression. This is where I do most of my work, really, like I said, dealing more one to one. Interpersonal oppression is all about things like harassment, bias, microaggressions, bullying, gaslighting, um, mansplaining, white splaining, you name it. That's the interpersonal oppression. And then finally, you have internalized or intrapersonal oppression. And this is can be the most dangerous one. This is around the self-talk. This around self sabotage and some of the trauma that you've gone through. So those are like the four eyes of oppression. It's important that you understand this because this is just the baseline, right? When you understand that there are like four different filters that oppression can go through, then it helps you understand, okay, now I see it's not just that, just like this one bland word. There are like four different filters of where and how it can show up.
So when you're working with people, which of those do you, I mean, it's one thing to say this is where they can show up, but when you're working with people, which of those things do you help people because we ourselves can control that? I
Right.
mean, some things you are in more control of than others. For example, you're not as in control of, say, a government policy or a corporate policy, although I absolutely believe we can change anything, as you know.
Right.
But on a day-to-day basis, how do you help people know what they can have the most control over of those four eyes?
So the four, there's two. So obviously you have the internalized or like I said, interpersonal oppression. This is all about self-talk, self-sabotage, and trauma. So obviously I work very intimately when I'm working one-to-one with women. We're really talking about like what are the voices that you're hearing? What are the things that you're using against yourself that are holding you back? And then we have interpersonal oppression. And this is all around harassment and bias and microaggressions. And this is where I say you really have to learn how to what I call put your vocal stake in the ground, right? And so this is where we do some of the vocal empowerment work where we help women really, really get rooted in the seat and the power of their vocal expression so that they have the courage, the confidence, and the ability to speak up about things that hold weight in their heart.
Would you unpack that more? So be specific about how exactly to put that vocal stake in the ground. Well, what exactly do you tell people to do? What could be helpful to people, say, who are watching us today?
Yeah, so when it comes to putting your vocal stake in the ground, this really starts with like I said, really understanding what holds weight in your heart, right? And
Mhm.
really knowing how to use your voice in a way that's going to allow it to be heard so that people aren't on the defense, right? But it allows your message to get across. And so there are three different ways that you can do this. One is by the use of I statements, right? And so when you're using I statements, this is especially when you're dealing with things like bias. And so you may say things like, I don't think that you mean to XYZ, but but in fact you did do that, and kind of explain what they did, right? I observed you do XYZ. I felt whatever the emotion is, right? And when you did that, this happened, and because of that, this happened. I am curious if you know how it would feel if XYZ, right? So knowing how to use your I statements in the right situation, but specifically when it comes to bias. Then you also have to know how to use it statements, right? And this is where true allyship comes into place. This is when you're encountering prejudice, when you're encountering discrimination. And so its statements may sound something like, it is prejudicial to say XYZ because XYZ, right? It is discriminatory to do XYZ because XYZ. It is a big deal that we don't have any people of color or women on XYZ, right? So knowing how, when, and how to use your I statements again, so that you can be heard and people can actually, it can land the right way so that people can listen and take it in. And then finally, really knowing when to use what's called you statements. And this is especially when you're speaking up for yourself, right? So, you cause me harm when you XYZ. You don't have the right to XYZ. You violated me by XYZ. You will no longer be able to XYZ, right? And so when you're using these statements, again, it takes practice. I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that it's going to come natural, right? It takes practice. But the only way that you can get comfortable and get the courage to do it with confidence is if you start doing it. And don't give people anywhere to hide. That's
Ooh,
the other thing that's so
ooh, I love
important
that.
about these statements, right? It
Mhm.
gives people nowhere to hide. You have nowhere to hide when I'm speaking directly, but respectfully, but you understand how I'm feeling and how you violated me and what I'm no longer going to tolerate.
So let me ask you to set up a scenario where you have done that. And I could see one of three things happening. One is that the person you're speaking with just clams up, won't engage.
Mhm.
Two is that they immediately get it, they understand, they want to hear more, they want to learn more. Three is that they get angry and they get defensive. So what do you do in each of those situations?
Well, first of all, if someone gets angry and defensive, then you just, you just take a break and you come back when they can be more civil. Like you don't have to even allow yourself to be in a situation where someone is treating you in a way that's disrespectful, that's causing you harm. So you just step away from that situation.
Mhm.
The second one is if they say, okay, they're willing to listen, then you just have you have a private conversation with them, right? This whole thing, this whole cancel culture, sometimes, it makes sense, but most times it doesn't, because when you canceling people, it means that you're actually abdicating your power to do something about it. Right. So
Right.
instead of canceling people out, why don't you call them up? Call them in and have a private conversation where you can talk more intimately around what's happening. But
Mhm.
some examples of how this could happen, you're in that boardroom meeting and someone takes on your idea, right? Someone runs away with your idea, or someone says something that's a microaggression,
Mhm.
right? Those are very specific examples of where you use these three different statements.
So if
And
it,
again,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, and again, the whole idea is that you want to leave them with nowhere to hide. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm,
there's no excuses. I'm clear in my communication, right? If you
mhm,
need more clarity, you can ask me, but I'm very clear and I'm being direct.
mhm, mhm. Well, and I think it sounds like what you're also saying is you're doing it in a way where your intention is, in fact, not to make them defensive. Your intention is to say, what you say, to call them in.
Right.
Talk more about
Is
that, because I think that is one of the skills that we don't really learn. We're a litigious society in general. We
mhm.
tend to see things in this way versus this way, but usually there's a whole lot of like intertwined stuff that
Thing.
where you come together, and once you begin to understand each other. One of the things I always say when I'm teaching women about negotiation is just find one thing you can agree on. Like
Yeah.
today is Thursday, for example. It doesn't matter
Right.
how small it is. Find one thing you can agree on, and then you can kind of move outward from there. But what I hear you saying is that you're not telling people to be intentionally confrontational, but you're telling them to set their boundaries and make sure other people recognize their boundaries, respect their boundaries. And if somebody doesn't do that, you are free to walk away. Did I hear you correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then if somebody wants to know more, you have to be prepared to have that conversation.
Yeah, you have to be prepared to have that conversation, or you could like schedule a second conversation. Like here's
Mhm.
the thing, there's this thing around perfectionism, right? Which is I duly own that I am a perfectionist. And the thing about knowing that you're a perfectionist is that you can recognize when it's getting in your way, right? So you don't have to feel like you have to be perfect in this situation. And you don't have to feel like you're going to get it right all the time. It's about giving people grace, but being willing to call them in when they step out of line and have a civil conversation with them. And don't feel like you're gonna be perfect in doing this because we're all like going through this stuff together, right? No one's perfect at it.
Right. And also, just speaking from, one of the things I always say about something I learned from my mother in the negative is not to let those things fester, and not to let yourself get bitter about it. Take some kind of action. I observed my mother always feeling like she was the victim, and
Mm,
always, and she became very bitter as she got older, and she assumed that people were thinking ill of her, which is not always the case. But
mhm.
when you ask those questions that you excuse me, when you ask those questions that you mentioned, and you take those positions, then you're able to be assertive in your own right, and set your boundaries, while at the same time allowing other people to enter the conversation on their terms as well.
Yeah,
I even
because at the end of the day, it can always be much easier just to tap out, right?
mhm,
Right? And you don't want to do that because, like I said, when you tap out or when you have that cancel culture, you're really abdicating your power to really step in and make a change. And
right.
that's just what this is all. It's really about like leading to your edge,
Mhm,
pushing the limits of,
mhm.
of, of where you can go to create the change that you want to see.
Wow. Well, we're up against some really tough cultural, um, ingrained cultural beliefs, norms, activities, mostly white, hetero, patriarchal norms. And would you talk a little bit about, it's really hard to take those on. Would you talk about how it does harm people, everybody, not just people who are the subject of it necessarily, but how does it harm everybody?
Yeah. So when you think about white heteropatriarchy, it really underpins all of the eyes of all the four eyes. It's the fusion of white supremacy, patriarchy, and heterosexism. So let's just unpack those three things just a little bit, just to make sure we're all on the
Mhm.
same page. We know that white supremacy is um It's the common status quo is globally held and often unconscious belief that white people and white ideas, beliefs, and actions are superior to other races, right? So
Mhm.
that's white supremacy. Then when you look at patriarchy, right, is defined as the norms, the values, the beliefs, the structures, and the systems that grant power, privilege, and superiority to those who identify or appear as men, are masculine, and thereby marginalize and subordinate those who identify or appear as women or feminine, or those who are non binary, right?
Mhm.
And then we have heterosexism, and this is bias, prejudice, or discrimination against LGBTQIA plus people, and is based upon the assumption that heterosexuality is a normal sexual orientation, right? And so when you think about those things from that perspective, when you unpack all three of those things, let's, for example, take someone who is a, let me just think about this. Let me give a really good example because I really want to break it down from the perspective of number one, those four eyes of oppression, and make sure we get all those in, but also make sure that you kind of get a clear understanding of what I'm saying when I say this. So let's think about someone that, just think about if we have a first immigration immigrant. Let's just call her Chris. Chris is a first immigration immigrant. And if you run this through the four eyes, if you look at it from an ideological oppressive perspective, and if she's a first generation immigrant, the thing that she bumps up against from an ideological perspective is that, you're an American now, right? And so because she's here, she's seen as an American now, and that may cause her to feel like she needs to leave part of her identity behind,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
You see what
Right.
I'm saying?
Oh, I do. I see that very well. I've had four immigrant grandparents, and they wanted us to leave all of that behind, all of their culture behind. And I really am sorry about that now.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And so then if you run that through the institutional oppression perspective filter, you know, it's like working for companies that prioritize the perfect American grammar. So Chris, being a generation immigrant, if she doesn't have the perfect American grammar, then she may have some oppressive behavior against her that holds her back, right?
Mhm.
If you think of it from the interpersonal oppressive perspective, she may be subject of jokes that may not even be about race. It could be people speaking slower, people speaking louder, people working with friends, people white splaining and things of that nature. I'll tell you, even from a personal perspective, like even I suffered two stress-induced strokes. And so, when I was coming back from my therapy from that, I had a whole speech thing that I, had to deal with. And it still shows up now. Like when I get very, very tired, you'll start hearing the slurring, right? And that was a big deal for me when I was starting to get back in the world. I was worried that people were going to judge me about it, right?
Right, right. Well, and we could step back a little further and talk about why did those stress-induced strokes happen. Obviously,
Exactly.
both the physical and the emotional elements of it, because
Exactly.
you are the subject of so many different of those four oppressions. You
Exactly.
it has an impact emotionally on you, not just physically as well as emotionally, I should say. Yes, right. So
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
think that's a subject for a whole other conversation because
A whole other conversation. This stuff runs deep. And
yeah,
that's why it's so important that like you get down to this level of granularity when you're working with people so that they understand that it's not just something, when people say just get over it. It's not that easy. You know what I mean? It's not that easy to just get over it,
Right,
right?
right. Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, the work you're doing is so incredibly important. And I would love to keep talking with you about it. And I think we may have to have another conversation, but I'm committed to having these intentioning this lives only last for about half an hour.
Yeah,
So I want to circle back for a moment to the something that else that we've done together, which is that in my book Intentioning, I tell the story about our Power Up conference in 2020 that was held
yes.
literally the day before the pandemic shut everything down. And I'm going to call you the curator in chief. I was trying to think about how I should describe your role and what you do for making our Take the Lead conferences and programs just so incredibly engaging and powerful for the people who are there. And I am excited that we'll be working together again on
Yes.
2022 Power Up conference, which will be held on August 26th, which is Women's Equality Day. And
Yes.
that is we decided last year to claim that day as Take the Lead's Day because it's just the perfect day for us. So you give people so many incredible leadership lessons without making it seem like you're giving them leadership lessons. It's all very you have this phrase that you use, let it be easy, and it always feels
Yes.
easy when you're doing it, but they're very profound. So my final question to you today is, what is your leadership lesson that you would particularly like to share with women today?
Well, I would say they're kind of this, it's kind of two things. One, really get clear around, which of your identities are, like most shaping your beliefs. And this works, whether you're marginalized or not. Which of your identities are most shaping your beliefs, your behaviors, your interpersonal, in interpersonal communication, and how is that showing up? How is that serving you? And then the second thing is really place that vocal stake in the ground, like really get clear around what holds weight in your heart,
Mm.
and don't be afraid to let people know what holds weight in your heart, what you believe in, what you are a stand for, and what you will and will not tolerate. And believe it or not, that's really going to get you more respect than you think.
Could not agree with you more about that. And I know people are going to be wanting to find you, Felicia. So how can people find you?
Yes, you can find me on my website, FeliciaRDavis.com. And I'm also on all the social places under the same name. So go to FeliciaRDavis.com. You can find more about the work that we're doing. If you want to kind of engage with me, whether it's individually or corporately, that's where you find more info.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Felicia. I cannot thank you more for being here today. And I want to also give people a little information about Take the Lead and excuse me, what we're up to right now, and ask them to share this intentioning this conversation around, because I think there was some really valuable information in it, really valuable insights from Felicia that I think can help so many people. So please feel free to share this around on social media and tell your friends about it. Make sure that people know and know who Felicia is and how to find her. I also want to make sure that you all know, I'm so excited about this, that I have redone the 9 Leadership Power Tools to Advance Your Career course. I will tell you that with thanks to Felicia and thanks to some other incredible people, that all of our Take the Lead curriculum has gone through a racial justice review.
Mhm.
And fortunately, it came out looking pretty good, but there were some things that we needed to tweak a bit. And we have improved upon our course. And I am very excited to say it has been re-released now. We put it out to the world again on International Women's Day, which was March 8th. And all through Women's History Month, which is this month of March, we will have a code so that you can get $100 off of whichever level you want to take the course. You can take the course as a fully self-study online course where you don't need anybody else. You can do it on your own. Although we do have a new um, accountability partner format in case you want to take it with some colleagues or friends. And there's a whole format that you can use to help you do that. Or you can take it in a way that you will get 4 masterminds, monthly masterminds with me, which I am super looking forward to. Or you can get the whole thing and get the course plus the masterminds plus small group coaching. So you get to choose which of those opportunities is best for you. And do go to taketheleadwomen.com/online course to find out more about it, or feel free to DM me anytime if you have questions. I'm happy to answer them. So yes, our website is taketheleadwomen.com. Please follow us on social media. I'm at Gloria Felt on all social media. And I really look forward to continuing the conversation there as well. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you again, Felicia, so much.
Yes.
I
Thank you.
just appreciate it, and I appreciate our friendship and our collaboration so much. And I will see all of you, I hope, next week, when my guests will be the 2 women who are the sheroes of the equal pay movement. So we had payday earlier this week. Well, I'm going to have Lily Ledbetter, who sued her company when she found out she wasn't getting paid fairly. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court and then became the first law. The Lily Ledbetter Fair Pay Act became the first law that President Obama signed when he became president. And the other person is Cindy Guerra Robbins, who persuaded the CEO of Salesforce to do a study of their pay policies, and they discovered there was a lot of inequity, which they then rectified. And so they changed their corporate policy. And those are 2 different ways that women are leading the way for all of us to get equal pay. So till next week, keep on intentioning, and I'll see you. All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.